will say that our business is stronger than it has ever been.
The success of growth and where I see companies growing consistently really is your people.
I mean, the story is not, does it make power? Because they all make power. The story is, what does it power?
This is What Solar Installers Need to Know with your hosts Hervé Billier and Joe Marhamati.
Hi there, it's Hervé and Joe with What Solar Installers Need to Know, where we interview solar CEOs and experts on how they run their business on the solar coaster. We ask their private revenue numbers, we give actionable advice, and learn about trade secrets so you can run and grow your solar business. Joe and I built a solar company from 0 to 12 million in sales and got successfully acquired. If you'd like to do the same or do better, go to sungrow.com/blog to get actionable behind-the-scenes lessons on running and growing your solar business. And now, without further ado, let's jump right into the next episode. Hey, Fortunat. Welcome to the podcast about what solar installers need to know.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
Fortunat, we know each other for many years, and you've been running ReVision Energy for how many years now?
ReVision started in 2003, so we're 22 years old.
Congrats. ReVision Energy, for the people that haven't heard about you yet, ReVision Energy is doing about 140 million revenue last year. You operate in Maine, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Vermont. You have around 420 employees, so around 200 to 240 residential installs a month, around 10 projects, commercial projects a month, and you have around 25 crews split around the company to install all of that. And all the residential installations are really done in-house. The commercial projects really depend. Sometimes, mostly in-house, sometimes with outsourced labor. But more importantly, talking about all that hard work, after so many years of being in charge, you also took a sabbatical. Fortunate. So tell us more about that. Why a sabbatical and how did that go?
Yeah, I've just been back at work for a month after a year-long sabbatical, so I'm getting back in the habit. You know, when my wife and I, actually before we were married, my wife and I agreed that if we ever had kids and when we had kids, we would try to take the opportunity sometime in our careers to go show them the world. We currently live in Maine, which is an amazing place to live, really an awesome place to live and raise a family. But we want to make sure that our children understand that Maine is not the whole world. And so this past year, when our kids were in 7th and 8th grade, we thought was a good time. They're old enough to be independent and appreciate it, young enough that missing a year of school is not that big a deal. And so we took a year to travel around the world and get some different perspectives and also, frankly, to rest and recharge, which is pretty important.
Which different places did you see? Where did you live and where did your kids go to school?
Yeah, we spent the fall last year in Tanzania, in East Africa, in the city of Arusha, and our kids went to an international school there and had a really amazing experience at that school there. And then in the spring, we traveled extensively, first in Africa, then through Europe, and we homeschooled for the spring semester, for better or for worse. And we, we tried not to move around all that quickly, but we sort of spent a couple of weeks in most places and tried to experience a bunch of different places.
Wow. If that's so important and you were able to do it, probably with the help of your colleagues at ReVision. So what had to be put in place for you to be able to do that? Basically, if other solar CEOs listen to this podcast or also other managers that say like, I would like that too, where do you get started? How do you prepare for something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think really importantly, so ReVision converted to employee ownership back in 2017. We myself and my business partners, 4 of us, sold the business to the employees back in 2017. Which began the transition of both the ownership of the business and the leadership of the business from the 4 of us to a much broader group. 2 of my original co-founders are now either retired or partly retired, and the other 2 of us are still active in the business. But we have built in both before and since that time a really great senior leadership team that feels, I'm happy to report, just as committed to the success of the business as the founders, which is a really hard thing to do. I mean, as you know, at that level of buy-in and commitment for a business, the way that a founder or an owner of a business feels is really special. And one of the things that I think is so powerful about employee ownership is the idea that you can get that, ideally 420 deep. And, we should be realistic. Not everybody is going to be as fully bought in and committed as the most. But certainly on your senior leadership team, you can get that level of buy-in. That makes it possible for me to imagine being away for a year. And I was really fully away from a year. I mean, I stayed on the board And so I participated in sort of the strategic functions that our board and oversight functions that our board does. But I was really pretty substantially out of management and leadership day to day. And that was great for me personally. And I think it was also really good for ReVision as an organization. Lots of opportunities for people to step into different roles, for people to be in meetings where my voice is not for a change, which I'm sure was delightful for people. And to step up and figure stuff out. And so, before I left, I thought this was going to be true. And I think it is true today. I think ReVision is a better company because of my sabbatical. And I'm delighted to come back and hopefully add something to the team that has been running the business for the last year.
So when you came back, like everything's running without you. Do you have a moment where like maybe they are? I don't need to come back. You had that moment?
Yeah, well, I mean, there are lots of things to do in solar company here in mid 2025. You might know there's lots of challenges ahead of us collectively as an industry and individually as companies. So I think there's no shortage of sort of places where I can put my shoulder to the wheel and help. But it is really a unique opportunity, and I feel really blessed that I get to come back into this business and think, where can I be most effective? What can I do that really helps move the needle? How should I show up differently in a way that just few people get to do? Because especially in the role that you used to have and that I have had, you rarely get a chance to take a breath and pick your head up, right? You're sort of cranking from one reactive opportunity to another. And so it feels like a pretty special opportunity for myself and my sort of personal professional trajectory, but also for the company.
It's true that I feel like as soon as you can take your head off the active the active fire pits and like the crazy stuff happening, and you can actually take a step back and think, that's when you really move the company forward. That's when creativity comes in. That's when you place that call to a large partner, build a relationship that ends up a year later, like on a contract, things like that. So when I had a management team and I could take a step back from the daily tasks, that's when the company grew. It's also when I was able to start Sunvoice. So I guess the prediction is with the work you're doing now, like clear head, that ReVision is gonna grow a lot then later on of the new business development and new pieces that you put in place, I guess.
Yeah, I think and I hope that's true. I will say that we don't measure our business success exclusively through how much we grow. I think that's a fool's errand. And especially for an employee-owned company and for a B Corp, we try to measure our impact in a variety of ways. We would much rather get better than get bigger if we have to choose between the two. There are reasons to want to get bigger, not the least of which is that the world needs an awful lot of the things that we do, but not at the expense of getting better, because we also have a lot better to get at all the things we do.
Thank you for rectifying that. So that brings me to the next question about what do you think is happening in the solar industry? If you had I think sometimes you think about it when you took a step back and now you're back in the game there, like, what do you think is happening? What are some major trends you see?
Yeah, I mean, we're recording in September of 2025, and obviously the solar industry has just had sort of major disruption when it comes to federal policy, right? And so everybody's trying to react to that and figure out what that means for their businesses and for the industry in general. It's also worth sort of backing up half a step and remembering that the solutions we provide for homeowners, for businesses, utilities, if you work in that scale, are more necessary now than ever. Right? So though it feels like we went from having a pretty strong federal policy tailwinds a year, 18 months ago, to now not just headwinds, but really kind of like a level of chaos, deliberate chaos and insanity in terms of both trade policy and energy policy. It hasn't changed the fundamentals, right? The fundamentals are the sun comes up every day and washes the earth in free energy. And our ability to harvest that energy is incredibly important if we want to stay living on this planet, right? That we are 6 billion people going towards 10 billion people. And we cannot combust our way to prosperity, right? You can't have 10 billion people dumping the waste of their energy use into a closed atmosphere and expect to have a planet that any of us want to live on. And so the need for the work that we do is bigger than ever. And so it's easy to sort of get really overwhelmed by the near-term policy stuff because we have to react to it because we need to stay in business and we need to continue to serve customers. It's not the macro trend. The macro trend, that wind is still at our back. Solar is getting cheaper and better. Batteries are getting cheaper and better. Um, and we got a lot of work to do.
About a lot of work to do, and you also mentioned the quality, not the quantity. Thank you for correcting me on that one. What is one thing you'd like people to better understand about revision energy?
Well, one thing you didn't say in your intro that I always like to say is, ReVision, we've always called ourselves an energy transition company rather than a solar company. And through our history, the technologies that we have brought to customers to help them achieve a clean energy transition have varied. We actually, we, like a lot of old school solar companies, we started in solar hot water business and transitioned to the off-grid PV business, to the PV business. And today we are providing residential customers with electrified heating solutions, electrified water heating solutions, electric vehicle charging, energy storage, as well as solar. And on the commercial side, some of those technologies as well, because for one, the same customers who need clean energy generation off the roof also need a way to heat and cool their homes without combusting fossil fuels. And so that's been a big part of who we are as a company. And I think it's going to be an even bigger part of who we are as a company going forward. The ability to serve customers more deeply and sort of join them in what is usually sort of a multi-year, sometimes even decade-long project of moving away from fossil fuels at every part of their lives is great. It gives you the opportunity to engage with customers more deeply and serve them better, which is both more fun and ultimately more profitable as well.
Let's take one example. I remember having a lot of conversations with you about HVAC when I wanted to start an HVAC part of Ipsen. How do you start those new departments? You mentioned EV charging, chargers, batteries, heat pumps, and HVAC. Is it customers that approach you and it's like, hey, here's a business need, or is it more like strategic? You kind of set something up, start selling it, seeing if there is a need. Like, how do those new technologies get a foothold at ReVision?
Yeah, we typically, as part of our annual strategic planning process, we have sort of looked at the universe of things. We often use this hedgehog concept. I don't know if you're familiar with the hedgehog concept. I think Jim Collins popularized it in one of his books, and it talks about sort of thinking about the overlap of three circles. And I'm sure I'm going to get this at least a little bit wrong. Forgive me, but they are sort of shorthand: hands, heart, and head. But they are the things that are consistent with your mission, your why, the things that you can be best in the world at, and the things you can make money at. And at the overlap of those three circles is the things you should consider doing. And so, we have thought, well, our mission is to make life better by building a just, equitable electric future, right? And so that defines the sort of scope of things we might consider doing. It means all the things that contribute to sort of electrifying our economy and improving the communities we live in. But we're not going to do all of those things, right? So what are the things we're actually good at? We're good at mechanical contracting. We've been, a plumbing shop and electrical shop. We used to install boilers. And so we're the places where, as wrench turners, we can make a difference and electrify the economy. And so sort of installing other stuff makes sense. So we're generally not selling appliances, right? We could sell induction stoves, that fits our mission, but there's no mechanical contracting work to do there. It doesn't fit our what are we best in the world at. We're not the best retailer in the world. We do think we're the best solar installer. Others may disagree, but we think we're a fighting chance. And then of course the question, probably the hardest question today is what can I make money at? Like where is the place where somebody's willing to pay me what it costs me to do this, plus a little bit, so I can keep growing my business. And that's the part that you kind of have to test, right? So the way we do it when we pick up a new technology or a new strategic opportunity is to start slow. We typically do it in one of our geographies. So we have 6 offices across 3 states, and so we pick the one that feels best equipped, either because of the market or because of the people who are there to sort of beta test. What would it look like to add heat pumps to our solar projects? And we do a couple projects. We try to pick the customers carefully for those first couple projects because, no matter how hard you work up front, you're going to make some mistakes. And you'd like a customer who understands that and is willing, if you take good care of them, is willing to be on that journey with you. And then we make mistakes, fail, fix, repeat until we get good at it. or we decide we shouldn't be in this business. And there's a bunch of businesses we have been in that we're no longer in. We used to install small wind. We're no longer in that business. We used to install commercial LED lighting retrofits. We're no longer in that business.
Why? Remember like sort of key reasons why you're not doing wind or electric LED?
It's not small wind is not a business that scales well. It's incredibly site specific. And so what we found is that we could install 3 or 4 small wind turbines a year. And if we can only do 3 or 4 a year, it's crazy for us to try to do it. We if you can't set up a crew and a truck to do it every day, we can't get good at it. We can't get cheap enough at it. We can't get good at selling it. And so things that are sort of, bespoke projects, and off grid is another one that we have moved away from, and actually, we may someday move back to when it becomes a product that we can scale with. Off grid, the way it was, 8-10 years ago, it's a bespoke project, and it's great for people who do it and do it well. Awesome, but it's not a business that is easy to grow. And for LEDs, what we found is that over time, LEDs became the standard, right? And so once every electrician is putting in LEDs, the only projects that made sense for us to do is those where we were already doing solar and storage in the building. Most of our commercial work is not in new construction, and so we're not there when they're making the lighting choice in the first place. And so then the overlap with our customers got smaller and smaller once it became a mainstream product. In the early days when sort of the conventional electrician, wouldn't or couldn't design and install LEDs, it made more sense for us today to stop making sense. And so we have to be willing to, be clear-eyed and say, this was a good business for us 5 years ago. It's no longer a good business for us now. And for us, it's really important when we do that we do that sort of with the people in the organization, first our existing customers, but then also the people in the organization in mind. And I was just thinking, the guy who joined ReVision originally to start our LED lighting division is now one of our best small commercial salespeople. We said there's no way we're losing this guy when we move out of LEDs. He's great. He's a total mission fit. He's a skill fit. We're going to find someplace else for him in the organization if he wants to stay. And he did, and he's been incredibly successful.
Nice. You also brought up making mistakes. Do you remember a mistake you made that you're not going to make again? But then also, do you see some other solar companies making mistakes that you feel like they should know better? So can you speak about a mistake from yourself and what you see others make as mistakes?
Yeah. Do you mean me personally or ReVision as a group? Because I have lots of examples of both.
Whatever you feel comfortable with sharing.
One place where ReVision has, I think, mistakes is in building our IT infrastructure. And this is probably not unique to us, right? So we have grown from a company of 2 people to 20 people to 100 people to 200 people to 500 people, 400 people. And so we've replaced our IT systems over and over again, almost always a little bit too late and a little bit too cheap. And the result is that we feel like we are continually sort of running up against technical debt in our software stack that makes it harder to do the next thing. And it's really hard when you're running a business to stop and reset and move to a new system or whatever, right? It's almost impossible to do, right? You're sort of proverbially building the plane as you're flying, or replace rivets in the plane as you're flying. And so I think it's hard to do really well, and I would say it's a thing that we have not always done as well as I would like to. And I hope we have learned some lessons and we get better at it over time. I think that's true, but I guess the proof will be in the future.
And you not only grew, but you also acquired other companies, right? So that comes all with that technical.
Right, and our business has grown in complexity too, right? We used to do a couple of different technologies for one kind of customer. Then we grew a commercial business that is very different. I mean, we built a fair bit over the last handful of years, a fair bit of sort of community scale solar, 5-7 megawatts in scale, which is a very different business than residential. It much longer time horizons. Very different sort of deal flows and money flows. There's a land acquisition piece. There's a project finance piece. There's a development and an engineering and interconnection piece. And so, we're sort of building all the tools to do that over the top of our residential business tools. And that makes for sort of complex systems, and complex systems are challenging systems and at times limit your flexibility. And so we're trying hard to think about what does it look like to have a system that meets all our needs, but sort of preserves flexibility and optionality in the future, because we don't know, none of us know what our business will look like in another 4 or 10 years. And in this time, this short time, with policy changes and other market changes, the ability to be flexible feels pretty important for a company to be successful.
And the mistake that you see other solar installers do, or I'm thinking maybe you're really well connected at Amicus. Do you see some Amicus members struggling, or maybe non-Amicus members that you kind of
Yeah,
see like, I
I mean,
wish?
a mistake I think the whole solar industry has made in the U.S. Well, not the whole solar industry, but a big chunk of it. And we haven't seen so much of this in New England, maybe a little bit in Massachusetts. But the sort of rise of the third-party seller and redline model, I think, has really significantly degraded the reputation of solar in the world or in the US and degraded the quality of the product ultimately that we are delivering to customers. And now, obviously, not every third party seller or every sort of redline focused installer is the
Mhm.
same, but I mean, there are enough of them doing enough damage to our collective brand that it really is problematic. And I would say it's not unrelated to some of the political challenges that we have in states or at the federal level. If you are not taking good care of customers, you are not going to have folks show up for you when your back is to the wall. And so in general, I think, that's a kind of extreme example in some ways, but I think in general, a mistake that I see a lot of companies and solar companies making is to undervalue how important it is to take really, really good care of customers. I think we learned that lesson really early because we started in Maine, which is a tiny little market, and you just cannot do bad work in Maine and survive. You have to take excellent care of people. I remember really, really vividly in that first handful of months in business, running into one of our first couple of customers at the grocery store in the town I live in and thinking, oh, man, I'm going to be in this business. I really got to take good care of people. I don't want to have to be hiding when I go to the grocery store or when I go to my kid's baseball game or whatever. And I'd never been in a sort of customer service business before. My background is in engineering, and I was working in engineering organizations before. And it was definitely a light bulb moment for me saying, the way we take care of customers in our community is the most important thing. And it's important sort of personally, selfishly, but it's really important in terms of how you build a durable business over time.
Yeah, that brings the message home like very clearly.
Yeah.
Um, I remember as a student, I saw some posts about you as a student where you were working on electric cars. And now I believe I saw a concert of ReVision with Ford F-150 trucks powering that concert. So now you have electric vehicles. So for those solar installers that would like to have all of the electric fleet or have Ford F-150s to drive around, like what do you recommend? Is it working out well? Like maybe with some caveats? Like what's now that you have this,
Yeah.
how's it helping you?
Like you said, electric vehicles is kind of my first love. I built an electric vehicle back in the late 90s and drove a homemade electric vehicle for a decade while I was doing other work. And some of my first professional work was in the hydrogen fuel cell business, which is a sort of a part of the electric vehicle business. So the electricity comes from somewhere else. So I love that we now have really awesome, not homemade electric vehicles to buy. I've been driving a real electric vehicle, for the last 10 years or so. First a Chevy Bolt and now a Ford Lightning, and they're amazing. I mean, when I compare that to the cars that I built and made in the late 90s, it's like, it's like a horse and buggy to a Porsche, right? It's like unbelievable. And yeah, we've been electrifying ReVision's fleet as fast as we feel is responsible. And so we've been buying almost exclusively electric vehicles for the light duty part of our fleet for several years, probably for 4 or 5 years. So our sales team and our project managers and QC and stuff who run around in sedans are pretty much all in electric cars today. We have some older hybrids and whatever, and they do everything we need and then some. I mean, they're cheap to operate, clean, they match our brand. They're fun to drive, and they refuel at the office. You don't have to stop for fuel on the way to a job site or whatever. And we've started to do the same with I would say the medium duty part of our fleet, so pickups. Not all of our pickups are going to go to electric because some of our pickups are primarily tow vehicles, and electrics, actually, they're fine tow vehicles if you're towing, 60 miles to a job site and back. But Maine is a pretty big place. I mean, we got job sites that are 300 miles away from our office. And you're not going to tow a trailer there with an electric car and make it home. But we started to add electric trucks and vans in places to our fleet. the part of the fleet that is not yet electrified, and we still are waiting basically for the product to work, is the medium heavy duty part. Box trucks is what we install out of primarily 14, 16-foot box trucks. The options there are not yet great. I don't think they're far away, but they're not yet great. So our commitment is to buy them as soon as they're available. And we've said we're not going to buy a new gas or diesel vehicle after 2030. That doesn't mean we won't buy a vehicle. If there's no vehicle that meets our needs, we'll buy a used one. But the idea of putting a new fuel burning vehicle on the road after 2030 feels inconsistent with what we know we have to do in terms of energy transition between now and the middle of the century, because a vehicle is going to have a 10 or 15 or 20-year life depending on type. And so that's what we're doing. And I would say we've been very happy with it. And we definitely have seen operating costs come down. I think people are very happy driving them. Our customers are very happy to see us show up in them. And of course, now we have a pretty significant chunk of our business that is installing EV chargers. And so you're kind of crazy if you show up at the EV charging site and you're driving a diesel F-150 or whatever.
Yeah, or maybe that's also us getting older. Like EV cars are not that novel anymore. Everybody has seen them. Everybody drives with them. You don't even have to be in the solar industry to drive it. Maybe that's just us aging.
Yeah, no, and it's fun to see.
Um,
And I would say, on our year abroad last year, it's fun to see how quickly they are growing in a variety of markets. I mean, in Europe and certainly China, as we know. But even in various markets in East Africa, I mean, we I have a friend who runs an electric bus company in Nairobi, and they are wildly cheaper to operate than diesel buses, and really growing fast as a fraction of the market.
Yeah, on my trip several weeks ago to China, I was in a busy intersection, and everything's quiet.
Amazing.
You see people moving a lot, like at fast, and it's just quiet because everything is electric. The little scooters are electric, the buses are electric, cars are electric. It was strange to see so much activity and it's just quietness. Like
Yeah,
that's
I
the
think we don't even realize sort of how we are surrounded by the din of traffic noise.
Last question about acquisitions. ReVision Energy has been acquiring other solar companies, and I wonder, is this something that's kind of strategic? It's like you have a strategic plan, now that it's that time of the budget, you kind of put in place maybe a strategy, or is it more something that kind of like, some people in the industry that you've maybe were competing with for many years, but kind of friendly competition? Is it kind of something that grows organically, or is it more strategic play, or have you done both?
Yeah, I would say it's a mix of both. In the last 10 years, we've acquired 3 solar companies. So we're not sort of gobbling up solar companies. That's not our model. But mostly they are sort of opportunistic. They're folks that we know and respect, and as you say, sometimes compete against, and who are looking for an exit or looking to do something different. And the value of solar companies is primarily in the people, right? I mean, we all think we have sort of incredible brand value and IP and systems and whatever. And let's do, and some of us have real value there. But like, I can go buy trucks and tools somewhere else. When we bring a team into ReVision Energy, it's primarily about acquiring the talent, because the value of ReVision is primarily about the people at ReVision, right? And so if we can bring sort of complementary skill sets into our team, we think that's valuable. Other times it has been a combination of that and a sort of strategic move. For example, we acquired a friendly competitor of ours down in Massachusetts 2 years ago that used to be called Sunbug Solar. And we know those guys very well. We knew there was lots of sort of mission and product alignment. And we felt like we had to be bigger in Massachusetts to be competitive. We were sort of what we felt was below the minimum viable scale for that market. And Sunbug was about the same size as we were in Massachusetts, a little bigger. And we said, hey, we could be better if we were together. And the owners of that business said, yeah, we agree. And so we have brought them into the fold. And so that's the way we've thought about it. We haven't done this yet, but I've also imagined that there may be places where we talked before about adding a product line or adding a technology. Instead of standing up a heat pump business, does it make sense to go buy a small HVAC contractor who's already good at installing heat pumps? It's not the way we did. We have done the growth of our various business lines, but I don't presuppose that it's not going to be in the future. It's because learning takes time and is expensive. And if you can buy smarts or sort of acquire smarts through hiring, why wouldn't you do that? We don't actually have to make every single mistake ourselves, right? We can benefit from other people having already made the mistake.
Under the last wise words, Fortunat, thank you very much for the podcast about what solar installers need to know.
Thanks so much.
If you'd like to do the same or do better, go to sunvoy.com/blog and get actionable behind-the-scenes lessons on running and growing your solar business.